We used to cross the border every weekend. Now, we don't even think about it. It's too expensive, it's too unsafe, and honestly, it's just not worth it anymore. These are the words of a Canadian who lives less than a 20-minute drive from the US border. And they are not an isolated case. A series of residents from Vancouver to Windsor, from Manitoba to New Brunswick are speaking out. They used to consider going to the US to shop, eat, and relax as normal. But now, everything has changed. In this video, we'll listen to the 30 most genuine reactions from Canadians near the border, compiled by us from featured videos, to understand why the US tourism industry is losing its most familiar guests and why this could signal an even deeper collapse. Don't miss it, because maybe you find yourself in these stories. Let's get started. Once upon a time, a trip to the US with Canadians living near the border was like a cheap game changer. Just fill up your gas tank, change some money, and you'll be back trying to buy a car full of pockets. But now, many people say that without meeting America, they've found their wallets thinner. You mean nobody wants to pay $35 for a cocktail? Shocking. This isn't rocket science. Properties started charging for what used to be free. Parking, resort fees, water. People resent it. These are the comments we compiled on our channel. And you see, the majority of Canadians share the same feeling about American trips in 2025. Expensive all the fees. It's ridiculous I won't be coming back used to go all the time. No more from Ohio. Imagine exchanging $100 and getting back a Canadian dollar thinner than a lucky money envelope. The current exchange rate fluctuates around 1 USD, which is equivalent to about 1.35 to 1.40 CAD, meaning for every 100 USD bill, you have to spend more than 130 Canadian dollars plus transaction fees or bank spreads. A weekend trip for a family of 4, money exchange alone can evaporate 100 Canadian dollars. That's equivalent to a whole week of morning coffee at Tim Hortons. Previously, a 3-star hotel night in the US border area could cost only 80 to 90 US dollars. In 2025, this figure easily exceeded $150 to $180 on weekends, tax-free. At current value, a Canadian family has to pay more than 250 Canadian dollars for a night's sleep, enough to rent a whole cabin in Muskoka. This creates a vicious cycle. Canadian tourists cut back on overnight trips, hotels lose revenue, they are forced to raise prices to compensate for losses, and so fewer guests. Talking about room rental prices in the US, one audience member recounted, "It's not just room rates, it's the fees on top of rates. $60 room rates get billed at $145 with all fees added." Another person said, "I decided never to return to Vegas 10 years ago. We only went for the shows anyway. But everything just got too expensive, and everyone had their hand out to grasp every cent we had." Many people compare traveling to America right now to paying admission to an amusement park window, but there are no free games inside. Not just room rates. Food prices also increased rapidly. A normal dinner for a family of 3 to 4 people at an American steak chain can now touch the light $120 to $150 US dollars. No tip. Converted to CAD, that's almost a week's worth of fresh food for the whole house in Toronto. Instead of a table full of beef, salad, mashed potatoes, you're standing in a supermarket in Canada, handing over a cart full of eggs, milk, vegetables. All can be purchased with the same amount of money. One audience member said, "Y'all priced out the normal folks that just wants to take a family there and have fun." It's worth mentioning that just a few years ago, shopping trips to Buffalo or Bellingham were almost a monthly habit for Canadians. They buy clothes, electronics, even milk and butter in the US, which are much cheaper than domestic Canadian prices. But now, the price gap has narrowed, even reversed. According to figures from a retail survey in 2024, 47% of popular household items in Walmart Canada are now faster or on par with Walmart USA after calculating prices and taxes. A customer in Ontario said, "In the past, I went to America to save money. Now at home, I still have good prices without having to drive 2 hours and pay tolls. While television news still tries to attract Canadian tourists back with attractive invitations, travel companies, hotels, and entertainment areas constantly launch unprecedented bargain deals. Many Canadian tourists have firmly affirmed it. The news is trying to gaslight us into believing prices aren't high. People, please report the truth, not sugarcoating the ugly truth. $40 daily for parking? $90 resort fees? Food is extremely expensive. $20 for a bottle of water? It is estimated that the number of credit card transactions of Canadian tourists in US border states decreased by nearly 28% compared to 2019. The average spending per trip of Canadian tourists to the US decreased by more than 35% in the same period. What's interesting is that not only economics, but psychological factors are also changing. When a trip that was considered the easiest item to buy becomes a luxury, people begin to carefully consider each dollar. And every time the calculation is done, many people choose to stay home. It's like a restaurant that used to be famous for its $20 steak. When the price list changed to $40, diners not only look at the price, but also wonder, is it worth it? And the answer, more and more times, is no. If you're a Canadian living near the border, are you willing to pay hundreds more just to have one last week in America like before? And if you're American, do you realize that every lost travel bill is also a bond between two communities that is gradually expanding? If in the first group we saw the reaction of Canadians when wallets were eroded from the moment of departure, then in this group too, what discouraged many Canadians were the gates not of iron, but of paperwork, procedures, and invisible psychological barriers. One of my rudest experiences returning from the Caribbean at Florida airport. I removed 2 sets of clothing from my luggage for inspection. One set was clean and the other dirty, which I was unable to launch, so I separated them on the table. After politically answering half a dozen questions from the agent, I watched this bee very deliberately corral both sets of my clothes and draw them into a single pile, then tell me to put them back into my suitcases. Someone said, "Who wants to be detected for an undetermined time without cause and without your right to a phone call?" In the past, many border gates only required passport checks and a few simple questions. But from 2023 to 2025, new requirements like ETA, electronic license, additional processing and testing fees have caused wait times to increase by 20 to 40% at many points. The time lost is not just the moment of standing in line, but also the feeling of getting stuck in front of a trip. A traveler from British Columbia compared, "I flew to France, just one passport scan. But driving through Washington, they ask all sorts of things. Schedules, hotels, purpose, work." This reflects a paradox. The shortest border can be the most complex barrier. For many people, a shopping trip or visiting relatives becomes more like a stressful interview than a walk. Not stopping there, the US has applied many apps to control entry of tourists. But sometimes convenience can also become inconvenience. Technology is introduced to shorten the time, but creates new risks. Just a typo or a blurred passport photo, which can cause trip cancelled. This is like playing a game. You have overcome all the obstacles, but in the final stage, you are eliminated because you filled in an empty box incorrectly. Many comments also expressed their concern about feeling unwelcome on American soil like they had before. "I also don't want my phone searched and then get arrested or interrogated for having a meme the US doesn't like." Why go to the country where you won't feel welcome? This is not just a policy story, but also an emotional experience. As the feeling of welcome disappears, the bond between the two sides of the border also blurs. Even people who have been to the US every month have now switched to domestic tourism or to other destinations such as Cuba and Mexico. A series of new policies from ETA to visa have made experiences more unpleasant and cautious. Many express skepticism. Paying $15,000 just to be interrogated by ICE, detained. Charging $15,000 for tourists. We don't want tourists in the United States. Would you pay $15,000 per person to visit another in the hopes that you'd someday get it back? I definitely wouldn't. If cost is the first hurdle for Canadians to consider, then procedure is the second blow to the experience. A short trip, which was meant to be enjoyed, has now become a test of patience. And when fun turns into entangled, deciding to stay home becomes an easier choice. If you've been waiting at the border for nearly an hour, paying the extra fee and carrying a whole set of documents and then being thoroughly inspected, are you still interested in repeating that trip? And if you live on the American side, do you realize that every minute of waiting and every additional paperwork is silently taking away the closest guests? If in Group 1, wallets are eroded by price, and in Group 2, time is taken away by procedure, then Group 3 reveals a silent but deeper change. Canadians are deciding to let your currency stay at home. Not because they hate America, but because they begin to find value and joy in their own community. An audience member in Manitoba shared, which is why we're spending our American dollars not in America, but in Canada. Can't wait to visit Ontario and to see all the sights. And who knows, maybe this may be in the cards for us to actually live there. At least one of these two countries know how to live in the 21st century. Another commented, "In 66 years, I've never taken holidays in the US. We have the most beautiful, peaceful, clean and safe land. Why would I go elsewhere? I haven't seen all of Canada yet." Another commented, "Why would Canadians go to the US to view the falls, as the best view is from the Canadian side?" When comparing a community experience, emotional connection with friends, and a shopping trip in the US, many people choose their experience rather than spending money on an unfamiliar market. It's like choosing to sit in the stands of your home, singing the national anthem with thousands of people, instead of being lost away from home. According to statistics from Restaurants Canada, domestic restaurant revenue increased by 5.8% in 2024, largely thanks to customers staying to consume domestically. The habit of finding American flavors is fading as Canada thrives on domestic cuisine, from burgers in Alberta to fine dining restaurants in Montreal. A store owner in Ottawa said, "I noticed customers were more aware of buying from people in the country. They want every penny spent to help neighbors and friends maintain jobs." An audience member left a comment on our channel. "All tariffs aside, we should have been buying our own products anyway. I hope this trend sticks, even if they drop tariffs. We buy direct from the farmer as much as we can. The fruit and veggies taste better, and they last longer in the fridge. Check out your local farmers market. They even called for action together. Not buying US produce at all, if it is not available from Canada or any other country. I am leaving the US in the store and look for an alternative. We'll never go back to buying US. Every Canadian needs to do the same for the strongest impact." This is a community economic factor. When the local economy recovers from the epidemic and faces inflation, every dollar spent in the country is seen as an act of support, not just buying and selling. Canadian domestic retail sales increased continuously from 2022, reaching a 5-year high in 2024. The local shop trend is widespread, especially in provinces near the border such as Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Canadian domestic tourism grew by 7.3% in 2024, outpacing the recovery in tourism to the US. In addition, many Canadian families still choose to travel abroad, but certainly the destination will not be America like before. A family in Vancouver said, "If I had to spend a lot, I would want to go to a very different place, London, Paris, Rome, instead of Seattle." An audience member expressed, "Was going to America, but changed it now going to Gulf of Mexico. We had been planning a trip to the United States. but in the end, we chose to travel to Switzerland instead. My family goes down to Miami, visiting relatives every summer. This year we decided to go to Portugal. This is probably a shift towards the experience goal. If the US no longer brings price advantages and newness, then Canadians are willing to wait longer, spend more on memorable journeys. Instead of driving across a familiar bridge, many Canadians are choosing to fly across the ocean, opening up a new horizon. From Group 1 to Group 3, we are seeing a clear picture. Not just costs and procedures hindering Canadian tourists, but also a change in heart and consumption habits. When they find joy, convenience and meaning within their own country, the need to cross borders becomes a secondary choice, not a habit. If you were Canadian, would you choose to spend money on your community, or still spend the same amount of money on a trip to America as before? And if you're an American in a border town, do you feel you need to do anything to make Canadian guests feel worth returning to? We spent the winter in Spain instead of the US. No strip malls, no fast food outlets, extremely friendly people, with manners. You see, sometimes a seemingly simple little thing can completely change a tourist decision. If Group 1 and Group 2 have eroded their wallets and patience, Group 3 has changed their spending priorities, then Group 4 touches on a subtle but decisive factor. The real-life experience of going to America no longer makes Canadians feel worth going. A couple from London, Ontario, recalled, "We went to New York State for dinner. The restaurant was crowded, but only a few employees ran back and forth. Waited 45 minutes to get the dish, and it felt like there was no longer American service like before." The post-pandemic lack of service labor is a reality in many border states. According to the National Restaurant Association, nearly 62% of restaurants in the US reported a shortage of staff in 2024, leading to longer service hours and unstable quality. Like setting foot on a stage where the actors are already part of the script, but the props are not prepared in time. A group of friends from Montreal said, "In the past, we went to America to hunt for discount brands. Now go around the outlet. Many doors close, and open doors are 10 to 20% off, no more than in Canada." Retail Dive noted that the number of outlet stores in the US decreased by 8% from 2019 to 2024. Many brands scaled back or switched to selling online. This takes away the boost for shopping trips that are the main reason for going to the US. An audience member clearly expressed their opinion. "Every dollar we spend at home strengthens our economy and our country. And there are much safer and equally beautiful places to visit all around the world that isn't threatening your future if you really do need to travel." In addition, according to a survey by destination analysts, the satisfaction rate of Canadian tourists in New York State decreased from 87% in 2019 to 71% in 2024. This drop clearly reflects losing its reason for returning to after a poor experience. In the previous three groups, we see the reasons that stopped the Canadians from the very planning. But Group 4 showed another consequence. Even if they went to America, the incomplete experience would make them unwilling to return. And when customers go not back, pulling them back is almost a double challenge. Have you ever returned from a trip and felt had nothing significant to tell? And if it's your first time in a place, will you come back again? If Group 4 shows that the experience is no longer enough to hold on, then Group 5 touches deeper than the emotional and psychological changes that are silently eroding the bond between the communities on both sides of the border. This is no longer about bus tickets, tolls, or dinner prices, but a story of memory, attachment, and of the gap that is growing over the years. Technology makes connecting easy, but at the same time reduces the need for face-to-face meetings. When the cost and procedure barriers are high enough, the solution at home but still talking becomes the default choice. It's like replacing a real handshake with a like icon on the screen, faster, more convenient, but lacking warmth. A mother in Quebec shared, "In the past, it was a family tradition of, every summer, taking her children to America to watch a Yankees match. But for a few years now, we quit. And then, when family traditions are disrupted, the younger generation will not form the memories associated with going to America. And memory, once not cultivated, cannot become the driving force of tourism in the future. A resident of Vancouver said, "I still like America, but the feeling of closeness is no longer the same as before. Something changes. It's hard to say into words." This is the impact of psychological distance when the image of a place gradually fades. Combined with incomplete experiences, that distance grows without a specific reason. Like two friends who were once very close, but realized one day they hadn't talked for a long time and didn't know where to start. A middle-aged man in Manitoba frankly said, "I don't feel hated, but I no longer feel welcome." Although not a negative public attitude, a lack of friendliness is enough to demotivate spending. In travel economics, the feeling of being welcomed is an invisible but decisive factor, as it turns a commercial transaction into a relationship. A woman in Alberta said, "It's not a concrete wall, but the feeling of having a boundary that can't be crossed as easily as before." This is perhaps a brief sharing of all the barriers, from costs, procedures, experiences, spending priorities, all piling up into a psychological wall. And when this wall comes up, only really special reasons make people walk through. From meetings with friends, family, sports trips, to weekend shopping habits, each small connection is gradually breaking. And when these strings disappear, it is difficult to reconnect, because they are not only associated with money, but also with a sense of belonging. Have you ever had a habit, a trip, or a relationship that now there's no reason to maintain? If you live in an American border town, what do you think you can do to make Canadians feel like is welcome back? After 5 sets of reasons, from costs, procedures, spending priorities, experiences, to the psychological distance, it appears that the link between Canadians near the border and the American tourism industry has been significantly eroded. But in this story, there are still glimmers of light. Even though they are fragile, it is still enough for some people to believe that things can change. A man in British Columbia said, "It's not impossible, but the recovery rate will be slow. Habits have changed, and it takes time to get them back." Here's a realistic look. In tourism economics, when a consumer habit is permanently disrupted, the recovery time is often more than twice as long as the decline time. Not only do we need promotions or big events, but we also need to restore the lost feeling of closeness. One family in Ontario shared, "No one hates America. Just simplify things and make it worth it. We'll be right over." This is the key point. The current barrier is not absolute negative emotions, but a series of inconveniences and cumulative costs. Removing them or creating new values can trigger a return. The future could be a rebuilt bridge or an abandoned road. Everything depends on how both sides of the border view the value of this relationship. Revenue, employment, and economic numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. The sinking part is trust, friendliness, and the memory of the natural passing days like breathing. Will there be a day when Canadians will be as eager to drive across the border as ever, or are we witnessing the end of a golden age? And if the answer lies in both hands, who, in your opinion, should take the first step to break down this invisible wall? We've been through 6 groups, and it's clear to you, this isn't just the story of a few cancelled trips, a few empty restaurants, or a few closed gas stations. This is the story of a connection that was once strong, is now thinning day by day because wallets are running out, time is wasted, experiences are no longer memorable, and most importantly, because the distance in people's hearts is getting bigger and bigger. When you add it all up, the falling numbers, the candid reactions, and the fading memories emerge not only as American tourism on the border is faltering, but also as a bridge is shaking between two communities that once stood together. But the question remains open. Can this bridge be rebuilt, Or will it become a relic of a bygone era? Who will take the first step to break down the invisible wall? Canadians, Americans, or both at the same time? If you have ever lived, worked, or traveled through these border towns, please share your story under the comments section. Every experience, every memory, whether happy or sad, helps us better understand what is being lost and what can still be saved. Don't forget to hit subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories, where we continue to explore the changes that are shaping the future of the two sides of the border. This video content is for informational and analytical purposes only, based on public figures and recorded opinions. This is not financial, political, or travel advice. Every perspective is referential and may change over time.